Bryan Dahn, my man, what is up? How you doing?
Man, I am doing great. It is great to be here, Wes. I am down in Fort Lauderdale. The weather's perfect. I mean, life's good.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that, and appreciate you taking some time to drop into the podcast with us today. This has been something that I know I've been excited about for a while, and I know you're a podcast junkie like I am. So appreciate you making time to join me on the podcast, and I know you've tuned in to the podcast as well from time to time. So I certainly appreciate that, but more than anything, excited to have you coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
So look, why don't we start off just, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, maybe how you and I connected initially and kind of what you're up to these days. And that'll help folks get to know you a little bit.
Well, I had decided to leave corporate America and leave my real job, I guess, as they would say, and look for some franchises to buy. And one of the franchises that I was looking to purchase was Shelf Genie, which you were working with at the time. And so, of course, that's where we met, and that's where you gave me your in-depth sales pitch on how I should join Shelf Genie and make all the money in the world, and it's the easiest game there ever was, or that's what you told me. But
I never said that.
that
That would be illegal.
Yeah, that's the only thing stopping. No, no, we went over through a lot of things with Shelf Genie, and then now we both are Shelf Genie franchisees, and we talk about a lot of different things now.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it was. I think initially started off as more of just a kind of business connection, right? You were looking at different franchises, got introduced to me and to Shelf Genie, but I know for me at least, pretty quickly into those discussions we were having, I realized we had a lot in common, just type of books we read, stuff we listen to, our mindset in general, things that interested us, and we're similar in age as well, so definitely kind of hit it off. And I remember at one point being like, look, man, I can't guarantee how Shelf Genie is going to play out for you, but I can guarantee if you become a franchisee for Shelf Genie, me and you will have a great friendship going forward, and also a little bit of competitiveness between the two of us as well in our businesses. So that's been fun ever since.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're in the Fort Lauderdale area. I remember it was interesting when I first met you. You were living in Alabama, but you didn't necessarily have like any hard ties. So you were looking at Shelf Genie and some other franchise opportunities, and kind of based on which franchise you decided to move forward with, that was going to determine where you were moving, right?
Yeah,
So if I remember
that's exactly
correctly,
right.
I mean, at one point we had to like come up with a list of like, some of the markets that Shelf Genie had available. And then you kind of were like, all right, well, yeah, I could see myself going to Fort Lauderdale. I think you went to high school in that area.
Yep.
We talked about a couple of other markets. And then if I remember correctly, from one of the other franchises you were looking at, Denver was a market that they had available. And so if you decided to go in that direction, you were moving to Denver. If you decided to go with Shelf Genie, you were moving to Fort Lauderdale. And
Yeah, I had actually narrowed it down to 3 different franchises in 3 different locations. And so you're right. I was living in Alabama, and small town Alabama wasn't where I wanted to build my empire. So I was like, I'm ready to go wherever. And I had narrowed it down to a commercial kitchen cleaning franchise in Portland, Oregon, a women's only kickboxing gym in Nashville, Tennessee, or Shelf Genie of Fort Lauderdale, which,
Okay.
I mean, in hindsight, looking back, was just, I mean, I don't even know how I came up with those, but I did the same thing with the other franchises I did with you. I was like, all right, what markets do you have available? What do you think would be good markets? What makes good markets? And I was like, oh, all right. Like, so Portland, Nashville, and Fort Lauderdale. And it was like, man, all right, here we go. So.
Well, I mean, that really sticks out in my memory because it's pretty unique. Like usually when I'm working with someone, even now as a consultant, you're talking about the area that they're living in, right? Wherever they live, that's usually where they kind of are planning to open a business if they go that route. And so for you, it was a little bit different. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is really cool. He's got the flexibility, to really kind of look at it this way. So I think in a way you opened yourself up to different opportunities than you would have if you were kind of locked into a particular market where you were going to open a business. So give us a little bit more of your background in terms of how you even got to the point of, number one, wanting to research franchises and open a business through a franchise, because it's not your first business that you've been a part of in terms of business ownership, but also talk a little bit about how you got to the point where you had the type of flexibility that you did to kind of move anywhere that you saw the right opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I was a kid, I decided I wanted to work as an investment banker, and that was the most obvious thing in the world to me. I went to undergrad in New York City. I was like, man, I go to school in New York, get my degree in finance, like we're good to go. And I did that part. I did the part I was supposed to do. I got my degree in finance in New York, and then I graduated in the spring of '09. So the '08, '09 financial crisis hit. I had always wanted to work at Lehman Brothers. Like that was my dream job. And I finally had my first interview scheduled for Tuesday. And the Sunday night before, they announced they were filing for bankruptcy. So I called them on Monday. I was like, hey, I have an interview tomorrow. And they're like, yeah, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
Like, all right.
Not anymore.
And so Lehman Brothers laid off 100,000 people worldwide over the next 3 weeks. So any job that was potentially available was gone, like with them or any other bank, of course.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it was like, shit, like what do I do now? And so I did what every logical, normal person would do. I moved to Tennessee and rented some land and bought a whole bunch of goats and became an organic goat farmer, which is
Yeah.
clearly the next step.
That's like right out of the playbook from college, right? Is if your dream job doesn't work out, invest in goats.
Yeah, yeah. And part of the problem with that is, as you can imagine, with a degree in finance, you don't really learn a lot about goats. You don't learn a lot about how to be a goat farmer, how to keep coyotes away, how to, a lot of things that most normal people probably knew, or most people that decide to be goat farmers know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So that was
Pretty
interesting.
steep learning curve when it comes to goat farming.
Yeah, and it was literally a matter of life and death, at least for them, because the number of goats that had died were just like, and you go out in the morning and you just be like, how? Like, what happened? And, you go down to the co-op and you kind of like hang out and try to find those old guys at the feed stand. You're like, hey, so I had this goat and there's this thing by its eye. Like, what happened? Oh, yeah, that'll happen. Oh, shit. Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
So,
So,
I mean, how many goats were you losing? Like,
I mean, I make it sound more dramatic. I mean, not a whole lot of them. Like it was probably once a week I would lose one, or I'd come out and there would be like, a trail of blood where coyotes had pulled them off to
oh, geez,
but anyway, we don't have to go into the in-depth goat
to the
farm.
gory details. All right,
Except
fair
for what
enough.
I will tell you, the secret, if you ever have animals in a farm and you need to keep coyotes away, get a donkey. I bought my donkey for $10 and put it out there, and donkeys and coyotes are natural born enemies, so the donkey will keep coyotes away. So there's your fun fact. If somebody doesn't learn anything else today, they learn that.
All right, I'm intrigued by two things. Number one, a donkey only costs $10,
Yeah.
and number two, like I can't picture a donkey actually scaring a coyote away. I feel like the coyote would just eat the donkey. No.
Well, I mean, coyotes are, like medium-sized dogs, and donkeys are like the size of horses.
Yeah, I
Size
guess.
there,
Yeah,
of
I guess
course.
if a donkey kicks a coyote once, it'll remember that and probably
Yeah.
not mess with another donkey, huh?
When everyone had told me for years, or not for years, but for like a year, like that's what you need to do. And like they'd see my donkey and they'd be like, oh, good job. You got a donkey. It takes care of the coyotes. And like, I still wasn't sure. I believed it. One evening, there was a coyote that came out into the pasture and all the goats were like at one end and the coyote came at the other end. And this donkey from like hundreds of yards away just stampedes towards this coyote. And this
No
coyote
shit.
just turned around and takes off like back under the hole in the fence and out into the woods. And I was like, oh, like this really works. Like that's cool.
It's not just an old wise tale.
Yeah,
Donkeys really scare coyotes away.
yeah, blew my mind. But after I realized that doing something you don't know what you're doing, and you're not making any money at, gets really depressing and lonely. I decided that I should go get a job like a normal person, and so I finally did. I finally went and got a corporate job and bounced around through a couple companies in Alabama and got to do where I was doing really well. I was the manager of the purchasing group. And my what ended up being my last year there, we were on pace to be pretty profitable. We were in a good spot, and I had a budget that I knew I could beat. Like, it was basically, we were building, 10,000 units, and your budget's $150 million or whatever. And I ended up beating my budget by $40 million. And I mean, I did everything I could. I busted my ass to do that. And I beat our budget by $40 million, me and my team. And I was like just beside myself excited. And we got to like bonus, the end of the year bonus, and I got $1,000 bonus. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like,
Jesus.
nights and
Does,
weekends all year, I saved $40 million. I got $1,000. I was like,
it doesn't quite seem proportional. Like,
yeah, no, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, there's no reason for me to stay here. And that was the moment that I stopped trying as hard. Like, I still did my job, but like, I wasn't like motivated. And, and then shortly thereafter, we had some changes in leadership, and I was like, hey guys, like, why don't you fire me? Like, let me go, and then we'll go from there. So, luckily during this time, I'd purchased some real estate. We started out, I found an ad in the paper, and there was a guy that like was owner financing a triplex, and like I went and looked at it, and it wasn't super nice, but it was fine.
yeah.
And most importantly, it was rented. And so I was like, all right, so what's the deal? And he was like, man, like, I have to pay last year's property taxes by like next Wednesday. He's like, so I got to come up with like $800 to pay those taxes, or I lose the building or something. I was like, okay. And he was like, so like for $1,000 down, like, I'll just sell you this building. And I was like, yeah,
ill.
Yeah, and I was like, I mean, this one of
like,
us.
Hey man, I'll give you $1,000 and a donkey. How does that sound? Sweeten this deal a little bit.
For $10 in there, yeah. But I was like, man, like, one of us is a dumbass here, and I don't like. Oftentimes, I know there's a chance it's me, so I was like, well, maybe he sees something I don't. But I ended up buying it, and kept it rented, and got to where I was making a little bit of money. And he called me like a month later and was like, hey bud, I got this 10-unit apartment building. You want to buy that too? And I was like, I mean, I don't have a lot. He was like, man, if you got $6,000 to put down, I'll sell it to you. And I was like, all right, like, I mean,
Damn.
I can come up with $6,000. So then I bought 10 units from him, and he ended up selling me a couple other houses, and all of them owner finance, stupid cheap. And you're just like, or not stupid cheap, but stupid low prices, low down payments. And I was like,
Right. Yeah.
all right. And like, so none of them was I making very much money, but I was making money, and like, I didn't have to invest a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like,
You're making money. You didn't have to put a ton of your personal capital up to get in, and then you've got an appreciating asset, working for you.
So then, about a year later, I went to the bank to refinance and, refinance everything. That was part of the agreement, is that I'd pay him off after 12 months, and the bank to refinance. And the banker was like, oh, well, if you like those type of properties in that neighborhood, I got 8 other houses that we're trying to get rid of. Do you want those? And I was like, I mean, I don't know. And he gives me a price, and you go look at them, and like 6 of them were like totally decent. 2 of them were terrible. And I was like, all right, what's the price if I take all of them? And he shot me a price. And I was like, what if I take all of them except for those 2? He's like, literally the same price. And I was like, oh, well, all right, I'll take the other 2. Like, we'll throw them in there. And so we ended up refinancing everything, and then adding on 8 more houses. And I was like, shit, like, then now we're up to like, 21 units. So I was like, man, this is to like keep me busy. Like, this is tough, And so then word got out kind of in the neighborhood that I was the guy to sell your houses to. And so people would call and be like, hey, do you want to buy the house on, Edgewood? And I'd be like, I don't know. You go look at it, and you're like, I don't know. And they're like, how about $10,000 total? And I'm like, okay. Like, and admittedly, this is small town Alabama. So it wasn't like, I was in Fort Lauderdale buying beachfront property for $10,000. But
no, and you probably weren't dealing with the most sophisticated real estate owners either, but
no. But yeah, it was just people would call and say, hey, you want this? Yeah, all right. And so I got up to where I had like 35 units.
Wow.
And I was at this like stupid point where it was too much. I'd hired a maintenance man, a full-time maintenance man, but it was too much for me and him to handle, but it wasn't enough to justify hiring more people, or more like hiring an actual manager, or, whatever.
Right. Like turning it into a legitimate business, I guess.
And so I was like, all right, I either need to get to like 75 units, or I need to get to 0. Like that's what I need to do. I was like, man, but I don't want to stay in like small town Alabama anymore. Like, this is not where I want to be. So about that time, as I'm trying to make that decision of whether I grow or shrink, me and boss man agreed that we didn't need to see each other anymore. So I was free and clear from corporate America. And so I was like, all right, well, cool. So I sat there for a few days and thought about what I wanted to do. And I was like, man, get this. Like, I don't want to be here. So I called a realtor and somebody I knew, and I said, hey, let's sell everything. I signed power of attorney over to him. I was like, you sign it, you sell it, you sign it, like, you take care of it. Just call me if you got an offer. And he's like, all right. He was like, what if we need to do something to sign the paperwork to close? I was like, if it's DocuSign, like, that's fine, but I'm leaving. And he's like, where are you going? I was like, I don't know. I bought a one-way ticket to India. And he was like,
I love it.
he was like, where are you, like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm landing in India. And
I'm globetrotting.
yeah. So we, turns out you have to get a visa in advance to get to India. So it turns out I was spending some time in Istanbul waiting for my visa to get to India, which was a failure to some extent. But I just remember that first day sitting in traffic in Istanbul. I was sitting in the back of an Uber, and he emails me a contract for sale. And he was like, dude, got an offer, on this property at this price. And I was like, all right, cool. And I just remember sitting there, like, checking off all the boxes and, like, signing it and sending it back. And he was like, all right, great. We're going to close on Friday. Like, I'll get the check deposited. I was like, oh shit, this is cool.
Beautiful.
Like, this is how life's supposed to be lived, like, this
Hell
is.
yeah.
Now, unfortunately, of course, not all the properties sold that quickly or that easily, but it was still really cool. So I spent, the next few months just kind of wandering around Southeast Asia, Northern Africa, up through Europe. And then finally I got to Copenhagen, and I was, I planned my attire for summertime in India, and I got to Copenhagen in September, and it's fucking cold.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, like, I gotta go home. And so I finally was just like, all right, I'll go back to Alabama and figure something out. And that was when I was like, all right, like, this has been awesome, but I can't afford to be a roving degenerate forever. Like, I have to do something with some money to make some money. Otherwise,
Sure.
I don't know what to do. And so I looked at some local businesses and stuff to buy. And a guy that I used to work with when I had my corporate job called me, and he was like, man, have you ever talked to, like, one of these franchise recruiters? And I was like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about. He's like, here, he's like, I'll get you a phone call with him. And I was like, man, I don't know. And he was like, look, it's free. The first phone call is like 40 minutes. Like, just talk to him. And I was like, all right, that's fine. And so we started talking to him, and he was doing something similar to what you're doing now, of course.
Yeah.
Where he's like, all right, yeah, I know, I have relationships with 185 different franchises. Like, let's talk about that. And I was like, okay. And he's like, so what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, well, what are you good at? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, where do you want to live? I was like, I don't know.
I know I'm not good at owning goats. Can we start there?
Yeah. I don't want to be a slumlord anymore, and I don't want to be a goat farmer. So other than that, like, I'm open for whatever.
So cross those two off the list. Funny side note, there was it was probably one of the earlier seasons of Shark Tank. There was a company that did something with goats. I think they, like, literally would rent you a goat or multiple goats to, like, get rid of the brush. Yeah, to clear your land. And they were at the time talking about franchising it. I don't know if that ever materialized, and if there is in fact a goat franchise that you could get into now. But
you need to look into that. You should add that.
I should. Yeah. I know a guy with experience.
Yeah.
You're the first person I'm bringing it to, if that's a thing.
I don't know that there's a lot of room in Fort Lauderdale for goats.
True enough. Yeah.
No, that's, well, between that and then goat yoga and some of this other stuff, I was like,
I've seen that too. It's pretty wild.
There were so many outside the box ideas that I didn't even think of that I was like, damn, I should have done that. Like,
shouldn't have got rid of all your goats.
Yeah, I should have just kept them all, right? No, that was miserable.
So you connected with this franchise consultant and kind of started a very similar process to what I take people through. So I'm curious though, coming into that, what was kind of your knowledge of franchising in general? Was it something that was even on your radar, or just something you'd never really given much thought to at all?
So when I was younger, my parents owned a Dairy Queen. So I was familiar with franchise. I knew I didn't want a restaurant. In my mind, really, I thought franchising, I thought restaurants.
Yeah,
And,
that's very common.
and I didn't, it never even really occurred to me. And that was when my buddy called me and was like, hey, you should talk to this guy about franchising. I was like, I don't want to own a restaurant.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was like, oh, there's plenty of things. And I was like, I don't want to own, like, I don't want to steam clean carpets. Like, that was all I could think of. Like, there was
Yeah.
nothing else. And he was like, dude, there's hundreds of companies. And I was like, all right. So we start talking, and, it was really a cool process. I really enjoyed it because you go through and you take some personality test, and
Yeah.
he learns about, what you like, what you don't like, how much money do you have to invest, how much money, if you invest that, do you have enough money to survive for another year or 6 months or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
really, it was much more in depth than I had anticipated. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but it was above and beyond my expectations. Then we went through and, we talked about all the different business models. And I think that's one of the biggest things I would say to anyone that's working with you would be, forget about the product per se, like focus on the model. Like, obviously I had no desire to sell shelves. Like, that's, no one ever does. It's ridiculous,
Yep.
But I like the business model. And so I think for a lot of people, it's a matter of, I've talked to another buddy of mine that I've sent to him to go through the same franchise kind of recruiting thing. And he very much wanted to be the guy working by himself in a truck. Like, he was like, man, if I do this all myself, I make $100,000 a year, like da da da. And that was what he wanted. Like, that
Yeah,
was his.
exactly.
And I was like, I don't want to be the guy driving the truck around all day, every day. Like, that sounds miserable. But
Yeah.
he was like, I mean, but what you're doing sounds miserable to me. And I was like, well, okay, that makes sense. Like, everyone's different. So I thought that was cool. The amount of time we talked about different models and how, do you want to be there every day? Do you want to be able to be there every day? Do you want to be able to allow other people? Like, it was really interesting. And that's ultimately, I think, what led me to Shelf Genie, was their model fit the image in my mind of the kind of business I wanted to run. And then it just, whether we were selling, furniture or shelving or windows or whatever.
Yeah, the widget doesn't really matter, right? And that's great advice. Like, I'm going to cut that clip out and just play it on repeat in the background every time I do an initial call with someone, because I mean, that's always my biggest piece of advice, right? Is just keep an open mind. And yeah, we're going to talk about the widget at some point, right? Because at the end of the day, you probably do want to be in a business where, you feel confident about whatever the business provides, product, service. You don't want to feel like you're scamming people or selling them something that they don't really truly get value from.
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you're like overly passionate about or know a lot about, right? It's first, let's get clear on the type of business model that makes the most sense for you, that's going to give you the quality of life that you're looking for, that's going to play to your skill sets, allow you to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And then we can start narrowing it down to different widgets of businesses that meet the criteria of that model. So that's spot on advice. That's something that I really...
One of the first franchisees I called with Shelf Genie just to learn about it. And she was down in Texas, and she was like, you have to be passionate about kitchen design if you want to be in this business. And I was like, oh shit.
Not me.
I'm not passionate about kitchen design. I've never thought about kitchen design. Like, I don't, and I was like, oh no, like, I thought I liked this business, but I don't. And then, like, I laid in bed that night. I was like, could I become passionate about kitchen design? And, like, to some extent, I guess I could. Like, literally, if I bought the company, like, I guess I would have to. But, like, I was like, passionate. Like, am I passionate about kitchen design?
Is it going to really rev my engine?
Yeah. And now, I can't say I'm extremely passionate about kitchen design, but I can say that I'm genuinely passionate about solving people's problems in their kitchen. I think that, cool thing with our product is I genuinely believe it helps people, which is nice. And it gives you a nice level of confidence that when you're in the home, you're saying, look, I understand, like, your problems here. And let me tell you, we really do have a solution. And so that's fun. That's cool. And so that's what's really helped me. And that was my big concern. So like I said, I had 3 different franchises to choose from. And one of them was a commercial kitchen cleaning franchise. And I I rode along with one of their franchisees for a day over in Georgia. I went to Augusta, Georgia, and rode along there. And like he rode around and did all the things, but like he was relying on minimum wage workers, so he had to go check on them all the time. And then some of his customers were paying him with gift certificates instead of with like U.S. dollars. So like where we'd stop, he would have these gift certificates for these restaurants, and he'd be like, "Oh, let's get some chicken tenders here. Oh, let's get that. Let's get that." And we ate like 4 meals, and like I'm a big dude now, and I used to be a way bigger dude, and he was a way bigger dude, and I was like, "Oh no!" Like I could see me doing this. Like I definitely would be like, I don't know that I need to be the guy that's working in the kitchen of all these restaurants all the time, because I totally be like, "Oh, throw some corn dogs in there. Let's do this." Like,
Yeah. I tell you what, for another $5 gift card, I'll come twice a month instead of once a month. How about that?
exactly. Like, and I was like, "Oh no!" Like this. I was like, this might not be good. Like and then the other one was a women's only kickboxing gym, and I'm not a woman, never have been. And I've never been a kickboxer. And I really didn't like going to the gym. And like, I liked the model and I liked what they were doing, and it sort of made sense, but it was just like, man, I don't even know if I could get passionate about this, you know? So that's how we ended up where we were. So it worked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, I think, and I'm not even sure which of the franchisees in Texas you talked to for Shelf Genie, and it doesn't matter, but, kind of like you said earlier with your buddy that, got into a franchise where, he was kind of the business, right? He was wearing all the hats, and like, that is what some people are looking for. And like Shelf Genie has franchise owners that kind of approach the business that way. They go out and they do most of their sales appointments with clients. And, I think if that's how you look at the business, and not just Shelf Genie in particular, but if you're planning to wear all of the hats in the business as a franchise owner, you probably do need to be more passionate about whatever the product or the service is, or at least feel confident that you can get there. I think the thing that you understood about Shelf Genie, and you were able to validate this with other owners that were actually doing this, is that, it's the type of business model that's designed to be more scalable, right? Where it's really not intended for the owner to be, out there doing most of the sales themselves. Initially there's some of that for sure so that you can learn it. But, really long term, the model is recruit people and build out a team that can handle your day to day. And then your role is to oversee the bigger picture. And I think that's what, made a business like Shelf Genie more attractive to you. So I think that's the way to look at it, right? Is what's the model, right? And then of course you do have to validate that with other owners in the business to make sure that whatever the franchisor is telling you the model is actually realistic and
People are
doable.
really doing.
Yeah, there's people out there actually doing it. And like Shelf Genie has a mix for sure. Like there's definitely some franchise owners that are out there, really working more in their business than on their business. But at the same time, there's plenty of owners that have scaled, pretty large businesses and are able to do that without a whole lot of involvement themselves, at least in the actual sales or installation side of the business.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's been real cool.
Well, and it's been, I know a learning experience for you, and, you're still relatively early into it, but, what advice would you give other than the piece of advice you just gave, which I think is key? What other advice would you give to someone that's, interested in, not even just a franchise, just getting into business for themselves? I mean, what are some of the things that you've learned since starting your Shelf Genie business that you wish you would have known prior?
Yeah. So sort of what I talked about with goat farming and other business I've started, like when you're starting it on your own, like you don't really know where you're going or what your goal is. Like sometimes you're just, man, I think this could work, and you do it, and it kind of goes from there. Whereas one of the things with the franchise is luckily you have somebody, both fortunately and unfortunately, you have somebody that'll tell you, hey, you're doing this wrong. Like you need to do it this way. And as a person who got into owning my own business because I didn't want somebody telling me that, like it kind of like it hurts your feelings. Like you don't want to be told, no, you have to do it this way. This is the way we do it with this brand.
Right.
But then also you're like, but there's been 100 people, 100 franchises in 100 different cities that have all done the same thing I'm doing, and this is what works the best. Like, okay, like that's better. Like
Yeah.
you
I guess it
you
makes
swallow,
sense.
yeah, you swallow your ego a little bit, and you go, okay, fine, I'll try it. And then it turns out it works well, and you're like, okay, like fine. Like, I didn't really want to hear that, but fine. Like, yeah, it was good. Like, you're right. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so that's definitely been interesting, and that's, it sort of hurts my feelings sometimes when I see the royalty payments come out for the franchise, and you're like, they're sitting there in your corporate office not doing anything, but they really are doing things, and they also, as much as anything, have been aggregators of information
Hmm.
and training and planning and advertising campaigns that do work and don't work and stuff. And so you're buying this whole book of knowledge that's available there, that makes it kind of worthwhile. Hopefully, I
Yeah.
think so. And so that's one of the big things I think that you get with the franchise versus just, hey, I got an idea, I'm gonna go try this, and yeah, it's tough,
Yeah.
but
Well,
um,
and no, I think that's good good insight, right? And the type of things that, some people might overlook if they are, looking at franchises, or just weighing the pros and cons between doing their own business and doing something like a franchise. And not all franchises are created equal, right? So that's a common concern I get from a lot of people is, but why would I want to do something where not only do I have to pay money up front to start it, but I also have to give usually a percentage of my revenue on an ongoing basis. And what I explain to people is, at least the way we've always looked at it, is it's a formula, right? So you figure out first you figure out what's the initial fee, right? What does it cost me to get in and become a franchisee? What do you get with that? Like in Shelf Genie's instance, and similar for many, especially service-based franchises, you get a territory, right, that you own, and there's an actual dollar amount that can be assigned to that territory. So that's an asset, right? You own it. Once it's paid for, you have the ability to sell your business, which includes your territory, at any point in the future if you decide to. Additionally to that, like you said, you get the whole kind of book of knowledge that the franchise company has accumulated over time, right? You get the business model, you get the training, the support, all the different resources. It's going to be different depending on the business in terms of what you're getting, but you need to understand what all that is and make sure that the price you're paying to get in is justified by what you're getting in exchange for that. And, if it's a good franchise business, in my opinion, you should pretty clearly be able to justify that initial fee, right? But then you've got to also understand, all right, what am I getting in terms of support and resources on an ongoing basis, right? Because I think a lot of franchises, they front load the initial support, meaning, they really, really focus on getting new franchisees trained and onboarded and open for business as quickly as possible. All good things, all very important, big part of why a lot of people invest in franchises. But I think more franchises than should don't focus enough on ongoing support, right? And regardless of what the business is, at some point, you're going to get to where you don't rely on the franchisor for the training and the support. You'll know the business, you'll be open, you'll be up and running. And that's where franchisees tend to be really disgruntled when it comes to paying royalties on an ongoing basis. So, a big part of what I coach people to evaluate is, what are you going to get on an ongoing basis well after your business is open and you've been trained? And again, it's a formula, right? Calculate what you're going to be paying and then figure out, are you getting more than that in exchange? And if you're not, you should probably go look at another franchise business, right? Um, but that's a concern that a lot of people have. And I think if you look at it the right way, it doesn't mean every franchise, the fees are going to be justifiable. But if you look at it that way, it's just a simple formula. Like with Shelf Genie, for example, even with the couple of price increases we've had over the last couple of years, if I were to figure out what we'd have to pay for our product, outsourcing it to someone else, it'd be a good bit more than the 5% royalty that we pay. We make up the royalty on cost of goods alone. And then there's, other examples of where we get value for that. But it's going to be different depending on the business.
Sure.
Hey, talk a little bit about, because we didn't hit on this yet, but I think I alluded to it earlier. Your Shelf Genie franchise is not your first business that you've started. And in addition to your goat business, was that ever a business? Did you make any money with your goats?
Not really. Never was actually profitable. There was some buying and selling and whatnot, but no, I mean, that was never an actual profit.
Breeding? Were you breeding goats?
I was breeding them some. The problem was I had feigning goats, which have super, so that super high testosterone, like they're super muscular. So you weren't able to use them for like milk or cheese or anything. Like their milk was very bitter because they had so much testosterone. So the only option you had was, you slaughter them for the meat.
Yeah.
But obviously, once you kill them, they don't produce for you anymore. So
Yeah.
that puts you in a tough spot.
So you were basically at one point in your life an amateur goat breeder that never really made any money for it, really just more of a hobby.
Yeah. I think I had dreamed of it being a job and an income stream, but really it ended up being just a hobby that I wasn't extremely passionate about and really love. So, but no, you're right. We had another business. One good thing about being in the corporate world is I sat down with kind of my mentor and I was like, hey bud, like what do I need to do to get the next title, get my VP title? And he was like, well, you need to go get an education. I was like, oh, I got a bachelor's degree. And he was like, yeah, go get your MBA. And I was like, they're
More
expensive and I
school.
don't like them. Like, it's like, it seems like a huge challenge, And he was like, well, that's all right. Go get your MBA and it'll be worthwhile. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, we can go do that. So living in North Alabama, I was able to get into Vanderbilt's MBA program. So I was driving up on nights and weekends to take classes up there. And while I was there, I met a classmate of mine, and when I first met him, he had a law firm, and it was this independent law firm. It was him and one like secretary, and like you could tell he was doing okay, but he wasn't like any kicking ass or anything. And
Right.
through the course of like the next year, like he suddenly like seemed to be doing a whole lot better and having a lot less stress and everything else. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what happened? And he was like, man, I just quit doing all my work. And I was like, huh? That's it. Tell me more about that. And he was like, no, I hired people in India to do my work for me. And I was like, okay, you're a lawyer. Like, and he was like, well, there's people in India that are paralegals that have passed the United States paralegal exams. And he's like, you don't have to pay them a whole lot of money. And he's like, a lot of what I was doing, he was working with bankruptcies. Like anyone that owned a BMW and filed bankruptcy in the state of California, he was the one that handled the paperwork for BMW. So it was the same exact thing over and over and over and over
Very
and over.
repetitive. Yeah.
And it was just a matter of, there were 6 legal documents, 2 court documents, and a BMW document. And you had to get all the right information and put it all together. And he was like, man, I was doing that. And I was like, it sucked. Like I just, it was boring and it was time consuming and it wasn't really profitable. He was like, but I hired 4 people in India that knew how to do this and how I could train them. And from there, I was able to like obviously do tremendously more work. And I was like, oh shit, like that's awesome. I was like, dude, we should scale this. And he was like, yeah, we should. And I was like, okay, what do we do now? And so we started kind of putting together a business plan and idea of how we could do this. And so we explored different things. We explored going to Colombia, where the price would be a little bit more than India, but we thought that the same time zone as the American law firms would be important or would be helpful versus having Indian people work overnight or whatever. And we made some mistakes in figuring out cost in Colombia or whatever. And then we went to India as well and talked to different people and started putting this together to where basically we want to have a pool of resources available. So we go to these law firms and say, hey, let us put together processes and procedures that you're doing, and we can train them, and then they can just do it for you and, go from there.
So you guys were kind of turnkey, actually. It wasn't just connecting them with the virtual assistants or the paralegals. It was, hey, we're going to figure out your processes, document them, and then train, these people in India. And so it was really kind of turnkey for the law firms.
Yeah, that was the goal. That was the plan. And so as we were working through this and trying to do this, he got a job offer from a huge corporate law firm, and they were like, "Look, forget trying to do this yourself. Just do this for us internally." And he was like, "Okay." And they offered him a boatload of money. And so he calls me and he's like, "Dude, I got to take this job." And I was like, "Man, I don't blame you." I was like, I get it. And he was like, "Well, I'm not allowed to own this other business. Like, I can't be doing this personally and professionally."
Right.
And I was like, "Well, all right, like, I'll buy you out." And he was like, "Well, no, like, I want to take some of these people from there and bring them just on over with me." So he bought me out. And then he had to close the company down, but he was able to absorb all of the people and all of the QA people and the paralegals and everything, and then just move them over to his corporate account. So it worked out really well.
How long into it were you guys when this happened? Like, had you started making money at that point?
Very little bit. We had some revenue coming through, but not a whole lot. We were probably 8 months in or so. And then he was just like, "Man, like, I can't say no to this amount of money that they're offering me
Sure.
to do do all of exactly what we were doing for them." And I was like, "I mean, look, you got a family, you got a half a dozen kids and a wife. Like, I get it. Like, go do that. Like, in the meantime, I'm gonna go back to India and just wander around for a while." So
Oh yeah.
it worked out okay. But no, it was really neat. It was really an interesting project. And it's one of those things that on one hand was so easy and obvious that you're like, "Why isn't everyone doing this?" And then as you start trying to do it, you go, "This is a huge pain in the ass. Like, no wonder
Yeah.
no one does this."
There's a lot to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very much just trying to figure it out. And that was another thing along the way, where you're like, "Man, like, as I, a year later, a year and a half later, when I finally was like, all right, let's look at this franchise guy," like, I was like, "Man, that would be super cool to have like a playbook," like, or as, I think you had Andy Pittman on here earlier, and you and him were talking about, the bicycle. Like, they give you the bicycle, like, you still have to pedal it, but at least you have a bicycle. Whereas, when you're doing it on your own, you have, some pieces of pipe and a theory of how to make a bicycle. And
you got to figure out how to attach the handlebars and make it control the wheels and go in the right direction. I mean, the way I look at it is, because some people truly do think like, "Hey, I buy a franchise and then it falls into my lap. Like, I don't really have to do the work." And it's really not the case. And if you're being told that, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Sure.
But the way I look at it is like the right franchise, it should give you the ability to run much quicker, right? To get to where you're trying to get much quicker, because you don't have as much trial and error. You should be able to get your business open and to a place where it can start generating revenue much quicker than you would trying to do the same business on your own. And not all businesses are, ideal for a franchise, and not all entrepreneurs are ideal for being franchisees, right? I mean, you kind of alluded to some of that earlier. I mean, if you're just super creative and entrepreneurial and just want to be able to, try a lot of different ideas and see what works and what doesn't, a franchise may not be the best fit for you. And there's different types of franchises out there too, in terms of how much freedom or autonomy you have to operate within the system, right? I mean, I think a good franchise is not so rigid that all their franchisees are just like, robots, right? I think good franchises do give their franchisees some autonomy to try different things and think about things a little bit differently, maybe than they've always been done within that particular system, because that's how you grow and that's how you evolve and get better. But there's a balance, right? I mean, you want franchisees operating by the same brand standards and following, a general overall system that's been proven to work. But at the same time, I think it's smart to give them some leeway to try different things. And I mean, kind of like we talked about earlier, different Shelf Genie franchisees run their businesses differently, right? I mean,
Sure.
even some of the most successful franchisees, you have conversations with them and you find out they do a lot of things differently in their businesses, but at the same time, they do a lot of things the same. So it's a balance for sure. But I kind of got off on a tangent there. But no, I mean, I do end up talking to some people that it's clear to me they should be business owners, but maybe not franchisees.
Yeah. No, and it definitely, like we've said, like it, sometimes you have to do, sometimes the franchise is going to say, no, you have to do it this way. You're like, I don't want to do it that way. Like,
Yeah.
and so it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's a there's give and take, in anything like this. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a partnership, right? Franchisor, franchisee, it's a partnership, and doesn't mean it's perfect all the time, but that's a big part of what you're vetting too when you're looking at different franchises is, yeah, you want to make sure the business model makes sense and it's a good fit for you. You want to make sure the economics make sense. You feel like you can get a good return on your investment, make the type of money you expect to make, but you're also kind of filling out the culture of the company too, right? Can I
Sure.
see myself working with these people, and I always kind of like the beer test, right? Is, could I actually sit down and have a beer, with these people and enjoy it?
Yeah.
So, which may have been the only reason you bought Shelf Genie, because
Yeah.
you and I have had quite a few beers together over the years at this point, and that's always a good time.
In multiple states and multiple locations. I
That's
mean, yeah,
right.
it's, yeah.
Now we just need to go to India and have beers, and then we'll be in a
I,
good spot.
there are a lot of other really wonderful places that I'd rather go than back to India. But if you insist, I mean, we can do it.
Well, I haven't been yet, so I definitely want to go at some point. But we can take a trip together somewhere else if you're not itching to go back to India. Fair enough. Well, look, man, this has been awesome. We've covered everything from goats to globe trotting to franchises to outsourcing. I mean, and to me, one of the things that's always been most interesting about you is, I think one of the things we first connected over was, like, we both read Tim Ferriss and listen to just about anything that he puts out. And I remember, having a couple of initial conversations with you and kind of, hearing your story. And I'm like, this dude is like literally living the 4-hour work week. He's traveled the world. He had passive income while he was doing that, virtual assistants and all. So it's a cool story, man. I have no doubt that everyone listening in is going to enjoy hearing and learn some things along the way too. So any final advice or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience before we hit the lightning round?
Man, no, I mean, just go do it. Do it. There's nothing like if you don't have a serious fear, do it. Try it. Whether it's going to India or doing whatever, buy a business, whatever. Like, just do it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like so simple, but it's true, man. I mean, it's like life's short, right? I mean, you can sit around for a long time thinking about all the things that you'd like to do and like to try, and before you know it, it's too late, right? I mean, we don't know how much time we have. So I like it. I mean, it sounds almost overly simplified, but it's really not. I mean, especially in the day and age that we live in right now, I mean, there's less and less excuses to not go do something that you really want to try, right? I mean, if you're stuck in a job that you hate, there are so many ways that you can, even while you still have the job, start generating income on the side, laying the groundwork to leave that job. I mean, I don't have a lot of tolerance anymore for people that, just want to complain about how much they hate their job and everything. And it's like, so do something about it.
Yeah.
I don't care if you don't want to buy a franchise. Fine. That's just what's worked for me, but go do something about it. There's any number of things that you could do other than the job that you're sitting here telling me how miserable you are doing it. Go find another job. It doesn't have to be start your own business. Just go find another job.
Yeah. Just being miserable. If you can not be miserable, you're winning.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, that's what it's all about. And, I'm going to ask you this question in a minute, but for me, like, my definition of, kind of success and what I'm working towards has changed over the years. Like, sure, I want to have, money and resources and be able to have nice things and take care of my family. But at it's so much more about my time now, right? I want to have control of my time. And to me, that's what freedom is all about, right? Having the ability to control my time, to say no to something if I don't want to do it, and to say yes to something that I do want to do. Whereas years ago, I probably wouldn't have been in a position to say yes to that. So anyways, I like that advice. Just go do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like a company,
A
small little
company had
company.
that
I'm
idea.
drawing a blank on the name, but I feel like
Oh,
maybe that
no,
was like a tagline or something for
they're weird people out there in Oregon. You never know.
a little small company.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you've listened to the podcast, so you've heard the lightning round, but let's run through this, and I'm curious to hear some of your answers here. First question is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received? And that could be in business or in life.
So that this kind of works off of the last question. And it was something that I don't know if you ever read the Market Mavens books, like decades. They're probably 10 years old now. They would interview all the like hedge fund managers and stuff and go through their investment advice. And I'm pretty sure it was Ray Dalio that said it back before Ray Dalio was the Ray Dalio that he is now.
Yeah.
But he says everything in life has a risk reward profile. And so if you can find disproportionate risk reward profiles, like that's where your opportunities are. And so everything in life has a risk and a reward. And if the risk is way bigger than the reward, obviously you don't do it. But a lot of times you find things in life that the risk is only this big and the reward can be potentially this big.
Yeah.
That like it's like I mean and like one of the obvious examples is talking to the pretty girl at the bar or something, like, you're a single man, like, okay, she says no, like, who cares? You lost nothing. But if you end up seducing her and making her your wife, like, oh shit, like, the risk reward ratio is disproportionate to the extreme. And
So why not? Yeah.
when you're looking at buying a business or talking to someone or asking for advice from a mentor or a business person or something, or driving home drunk on the other side of a disproportionate risk reward profile, like,
Sure.
everything has a risk reward profile. So if you take a second and think about it, figure out where the disproportion is, and if the reward is disproportionately larger than the risk, it's an obvious yes, do that.
I like that. I think it's a good way of thinking about it. And I've read Ray Dalio's Principles book. And so he definitely, I don't know if he says it that exact way, but he definitely talks about some of that in there. My dogs are going crazy. We'll have to see if we can edit that out. The joys of running a podcast from home. But I would add to that is also, like, when you're thinking about the risk and the reward, think through it logically, especially on the risk side, right? Because people tend to really, in their mind, conjure up, the consequences of taking a risk and if it goes wrong. And a lot of times it's not that realistic, right? I mean, they conjure up these worst case scenarios that are so unlikely to ever play out, but it paralyzes them, right? And it stops them from moving forward. So, and I've talked about this on a podcast before. I mean, Tim Ferriss has a great TED Talk where he talks about this exercise he does called fear setting, right? And it's just really logically thinking through the risk and the reward. And then also, like, if you take the risk and it doesn't work out well, what can you do to prevent a worst case scenario? What can you do to come back from a worst case scenario? And 9 times out of 10, you go through that exercise and you realize, the consequences are not actually anywhere near as bad as I had, thought that they would be in my head. So anyways, I love that. But yeah, I would just add to it, think logically through the process.
It's good advice for everything as well. Try to be logical.
Yeah, fair enough. That's kind of like canned good advice. Think logically. Do you have a morning routine?
I do. I've been putting one together the last month or so. It's actually pretty awesome. I think you had Jack Daly on here. If not, I know you talked about him. We've met him before.
Yeah.
And he was all about his triathlons and his Ironmans. He's, and I don't know, he's 112 years old now, but he didn't learn to swim until he was 94 or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I've decided, when I first was started with Shelf Genie, I decided I needed a goal. So I was like, oh, I'm going to run a half marathon. So I did that earlier this year, and that was fine. And so now I was like, well, I need a different goal. So I decided I'm going to do a sprint triathlon this fall.
Oh, shit.
So Mondays and Fridays, I bike down to the beach, watch the sunrise, and then bike back. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I drive to the beach and I swim. And then on Wednesdays and Saturdays, I go running. And so that's been my plan, and that'll be my morning routine at least until September. And then depending on if I meet my goals for the time of the sprint triathlon or not, that might be the routine that continues. I don't know. We'll see. But that's what I'm doing right now, and it's amazing. You get up and you go jump in the water, and yeah, it's Florida, but the water's cold, and like the first thing you do is you get in there and you're like, whew, man, all right, like this is, and then you're like, all right, here we go, we got this. Like,
Hell yeah. I mean, that'll definitely wake you up. But I mean, like, how good do you feel when you're done with all of that in the morning? Like,
and a lot of times, I mean, sometimes on the bike rides, we'll meet up with people, or I'll meet up with people and we'll stop and have breakfast or something. But you're coming home from your swim, and like you've swam a mile and you're already back home, and it's like 8:30. So you hop in the shower, and then, you start your day and it's 9 o'clock, and you feel like you've already done so much.
oh like, yeah. I mean, you could call it a day at that point, and you've had a productive day, right?
Sometimes I do that too, so that's nice.
Yeah. Well, perks of being a business owner, right?
That's right.
But no, I mean, I don't always like work out in the mornings, but when I do get like an actual workout in the morning, like the rest of my day, I feel amazing. I have more energy. It just kind of gives me confidence too. I'm like, hey, I just kicked ass this morning. Like I can do whatever else, I need to do today, or that the day throws at me. And I mean, you texted me a picture this morning of you on the beach, watching the sunrise. It was awesome. I mean, what a way to start your day. Like, I mean,
and it's good for your body, but it's like that good for your soul stuff,
yeah,
like this,
yeah,
being in nature and watching the sunrise and just like, all right, like, and then you realize that like that stupid thing at work that, or, with your business, it's whatever, like it's still going to be there tomorrow, or it's going to heal, like whatever, like nothing matters, like everything matters, but nothing matters. Like,
it just gives you some perspective.
Exactly. It's very,
yeah. I love it. That's awesome, man. Well, keep it up. Keep me posted on how the training for the triathlon's going.
Absolutely.
Awesome. What book are you reading right now?
Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. He was the one that wrote The Power of Habits
a
few years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize Smarter, Faster, Better was a thing until the other day. And reading might be an overstatement. I got my library card, so I just listened to the audiobooks, and I'll do that while running or biking or whatever. And so that's really allows you to kill two birds with one stone and really be good. But I've enjoyed that. I've actually have some notes. I have a meeting with my team here in just a few minutes that I've taken from that book that I'm going to share with them. So that'll be good.
All right. I'm going to check that one out because I've got The Power of Habit right here. I've read it at least 3 times so far. Love it. I've had a couple people tell me that they've read that book. I didn't realize it was by him though.
Yeah.
So that makes it even more intriguing. So I'll tee that one up as well.
Definitely worth adding to your list.
Awesome. All right. So final question. What is your definition of freedom, and are you living it?
And I mean, freedom's the opportunity to make your own decisions and to live off the consequences thereof, right? Like if you have the opportunity to make your own decisions, and you go from there. And am I living it? Absolutely. Like for better or for worse right now, yeah. I'm living my own decisions, and hopefully some of these decisions will help me make better decisions as we go forward. But also some of the bad decisions that we've talked about with, being a goat farmer or a paralegal outsourcer or whatever, allow you to pick up different things to build for here. So no, I absolutely would say I'm living with my freedom, and I'm happy as can be.
That's awesome, man. I love it. And I think that's very well said. Well, hey man, I appreciate you coming on. Just wanted to take a quick second to acknowledge you. You've been an awesome friend since we've met. I know I've learned a ton from you, and look forward to continuing our friendship and a little bit of healthy competitiveness with our Shelf Genie businesses. But I definitely look forward to watching you continue to grow your Shelf Genie business and, whatever you decide to tackle in addition to that.
Absolutely.
All right,
It's been
man.
a pleasure.
Thanks for dropping in with us.
All right, big dog. Thank you.
Thanks.